You really think that after all these years you're still better than me? For one thing, I do have a sharp green stick to poke you with. Hello my friends, welcome back to Player Display and Happy New Year! I hope, let's be sure that this 2025 shapes up to be an okay year. No idea these days, but with any luck, things will shift in our favor. Anyhow, now that New Year's has arrived, being the collector that I am, I've got a lot of new and old things to look at on this channel. So for now, we're going to keep it small, and we're going to start off with one of the 3 different variants of the Christopher Reeve Superman from McFarlane DC Multiverse, or in this case, Page Punchers, because it's different from Multiverse, which is a little bit weird. I don't know what the difference is, except that they come in the comic, but as far as I can tell, it's usually the same pieces that are recycled and same scale and everything, so I don't know why there's a difference there, but because this is technically DC Direct, so a little bit of confuzzlement in there, but that being said, this is a pretty neat looking figure. So before we hop into this, again, I said there were 3 versions of this figure. Firstly, there is the standard Christopher Reeve figure, which will be arriving soon, I hope, because I did manage to get that one on pre-order when he was first dropped on BBTS. I actually saw him in the same shop where I saw this dude, but somebody already had him reserved, so I wasn't able to get him there. Not a big deal. I was able to get the comic book version over here, or the Page Punchers version, rather. And the third version is a Platinum Chase variant of the initial release, but instead in darker colors to better embody him as he looked in Superman 3, where he had the evil version of Superman running around briefly. So, unfortunately, that's a figure I'm probably not going to be able to get. I mean, just look on eBay and you'll see the numbers. They talk. And I'll be honest here, if I'm not able to get that platinum figure, I just might be tempted to custom paint this one to get that evil Superman. So I'll have the standard Christopher Reeve, then I'll have the evil head sculpt that comes with that Reeve, put it on this guy, then repaint him, and then that'll be a little workaround. But I'll think about it, because as he is, he's still a pretty neat figure. I mean, not for everybody, but still something worth looking at. So at face value, this figure as a Page Punchers variant of the initial one, you might expect that this would be all recycled parts just with a new paint job, but I've actually looked up a few reviews already, and there are some different parts. So this figure is worth looking at as we're waiting for the standard release, which I'm hoping releases soon. But that being said, let's hop into the packaging. Clamshell again, you know how much I absolutely adore clamshell packaging, but I'll deal with that off camera. But yeah, you get a very good display of the figure, I will say. It does look good. You got the figure in there with a cell shading in there to embody as he looked in the Superman 78 comics. One of the comics being in the backdrop over here. We'll have a better look at that on the reverse of the packaging. He also has several alternate hands. Looks like he's got 8, which is fantastic. You see those exact same hands as the other 2 Supermen. Down here, got DC Direct. Once again, this is not a DC Multiverse, which I will erroneously call it throughout this review, likely. Superman. Nothing on the sides, or the top, or the bottom. Well, the bottom you get the legalese and stuff, but it does allow a lot of nice light to shine into the packaging, so that's really the only thing I like about clamshell packaging. Other than that, nothing else. And then off to the back, you actually have the cover of the comic, Superman 78. I think this is a modern comic meant to take place during 1978 Donnerverse. I could be wrong about that, I'm not totally sure. This is, interestingly, 1 of 6, so I guess they might release more from this comic, little by little, I'm not too sure. But down here, you also got Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, and Brainiac in this universe, so that should be pretty interesting. I mean, you see his big old freaking ship or drone in the background as well, so that should be interesting. This might be one of those few Page Punchers comics I will actually open and have a look at. But anyways, that being said, let me take my time with Betsy over here, and of course, Donnie Boy, and get this guy out of the packaging. A little update as I was cracking this figure out of his prison. Over here, there is actually a tray in the back, which contains the stand and the card. I haven't seen Page Punchers do this before. Then again, I don't collect a whole lot of Page Punchers, but still nice. It's a good way to protect the stand as well as the card. Although there is some tape on the card, I'm hoping that it won't peel off the printing with it. But let's just give that a try very quickly. For a little bit careful with that. And yeah, should be able to pop the card out. I'll have a look at that later. So yeah, okay. All good, just wanted to note that quick. Here's Christopher Reeve out of the packaging, and I'll be honest with you, I had a few doubts in there. Like, again, I got him kind of as a fodder piece, but after playing around with him and looking over the details, I actually like him a little bit more than I initially thought. He's not without his problems. Again, there's some structural differences that we'll talk about a little bit later, but overall, I mean, conceptually, this figure is pretty interesting and overall well executed, so he's a pretty fun time. So all that being said, let's just hop right into the review. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about immediately is there is actually oil on this figure, and it doesn't feel right at all. Like, you can see it's really, really glistening right here on the upper left ab. That is actually, well, I guess, is oil a liquid? Well, whatever it is. I'm no scientist, I don't give a shit. But, yeah, it's an oily substance of some sort. So, when you get this figure, I'm not sure if that's for all page punchers, if it's just for this copy, I don't know. But when you first take this figure out of the packaging, be sure to spot check it for oil, because I don't think you want the oil getting on the nice soft goods cape over here, especially since it's such light colors. So I'm gonna do a quick little spot check and wipe some oil off if need be. Alright, back to the review, and honestly, now that I've cleaned up the figure and inspected it a little more closely, I feel more 50-50 about it now. Like, for every good thing, there's something else that's a little bit weird, so we'll go over it as we do, but for now, let's start off with the head sculpt. Rumor has it, this is a different head sculpt than what's seen on the standard and platinum releases of Christopher Reeve, which is interesting. I don't know if that has something to do with this being Page Punchers or DC Direct, as opposed to DC Multiverse, but from what I know, I think the head sculpt is different, if not better, than the standard one. And on that note, if this were given a more realistic paint job rather than a cel-shaded one, this might be the superior head sculpt that they should have gone with on the other two figures. But again, I have neither of those in hand, so I can't really speak to that. Just a theory right now. But going into the face, it does look good. I mean, it looks like a cartoon cel-shaded version of Christopher Reeve. You have some cel-shaded details on the corners of the mouth, down here the dimple in the chin, this crease below the mouth, and around the eyes as well. There's almost this darkness around them, which I think is pretty neat. I like that. The eyebrows feel a little bit sloppy, at least this one over here. As you can see, there's slight muddiness to it. This one, not as much. Maybe it's just, like, meant to be a fade sort of effect, and I'm just not seeing that right. But, yeah, it's there. It doesn't really hurt the figure, especially from a distance. I actually really like the hair. You've seen in previous Superman releases, I think the DC Rebirth one had it, where it had a blue hue to it. But here it's a lot more pronounced because it's meant to look a little bit more cartoony rather than realistic, more comic-y for obvious reasons. So it's more of a straight dry brush than a blue rub, if you will. And it really does bring out the very, very nice hair sculpt, which I like a lot. Not as much blue in the back, which is fine. Although, when you do get to this side, you'll notice there's some paint miss over here on the sideburn. So that's something that I'm just going to correct. I'm just going to slide some black across it. But then again, if I'm going to turn this into the evil Superman, I'm going to be removing his head sculpt entirely. So, again, not too sure what the fate of this figure will be in my collection. But so far, pretty good. But then again, when we get to the neck, that brings up another point of critique with this figure. On the other two Supermen, as far as I've known, the cape, which is great, by the way, it goes over the neck sculpt, but this time it goes all the way under it, and it feels a little bit weird. Honestly, it doesn't bug me too much, but I will say that aesthetically it is not preferable. There are workarounds that they could have done. It's been proven with the other two releases, so I'm not sure why they didn't do it here. But yeah, in this case, the cape goes underneath the greater neck sculpt, which feels very odd. I almost wish that what they could have done is like had two ports, like one here and one here, and then slot the wire through it or something like that, so it looks like the cape's going over rather than under the neck. But yeah, that's the mechanism they went with, and I'd be fine with that if I didn't already know that the other two versions of this figure were more well executed, so that's a little bit strange. Anyways, moving on down, again, looks very cartoony. You get the Superman logo from 78, of course, but it has a black outline, again, to make it feel more comic-y. I'm going to try limiting how many times I say that from now on in this video. Then you get more cel shading, especially around this pec over here, and then the side of the abs. And then over here on this pec as well, but not the abs here. So there's some asymmetry, and I actually like that. It varies him a little bit. So when you pose him up, there's some different elements of the structure that pop out, and some that does not. So I don't know, it's interesting. It's a creative idea for a figure. Not brand new, but so cool to see it here done with a Superman. Down here, we have more cell shading on the arms, here along the bicep, or is that that's bicep? It depends on which way you're articulated, I guess. Not as much cell shading here on the forearm, though you do have the wrist, and this is another point of critique with this figure that I've been hearing going around. The blue should stop right about there. And then this should be flesh tone, and preferably maybe sculpted in a sphere or something that feels more flesh-like. It feels like it's cloth. And it shouldn't be blue all the way up here where it just meets the palm. That feels a little bit awkward, but not a huge thing for me. Again, this guy's going to be at a distance anyways, so it doesn't really rock the boat for me a whole ton. But then, of course, when you go to the right arm, the cell shading does vary, even though the sculpt is all the same, so that's pretty interesting. And another thing I do want to note is they are double jointed, which is the McFarlane way by now, that's expected, but the joint kind of pops out of the main sculpt, which feels a little weird. You see there's a lip that's kind of poking out of the whole sculpt there. And also, it does break up the greater cell shading, which is kind of unfortunate. So this cell shading that's on the bicep, it should continue down here to the forearm. So I guess that's something you could custom paint in yourself if you really wanted to. But yeah, it just interrupts the whole purpose of this figure, being that it's supposed to be cell shaded. So that's a little bit strange. And speaking of another strange element, once again, talking about the fact that we already have a base Christopher Reeve McFarlane figure, they did something interesting with the torso, in that the torso is reused from a different Superman figure, rather than the brand new one that they did for the standard Christopher Reeve. So I don't know why they didn't use that one and bring it over here. But that being said, I don't mind that at all. It just makes him seem a little bit more bulky, a little bit more larger than life, more stylized as he would show up in the pages of a comic. So that doesn't bug me too much. It might bug you because it's inconsistent, but an interesting stylistic choice, or maybe just an oversight. I'm not sure. Y'all either love it or hate it. It's there. But for me, I think it works. It's okay. Down to the diaper, spandex, whatever you want to call it, you have really, really heavy cell shading. I actually think a hair too much for my taste. It gets really blocky, I think, over here on the side of the pelvis and down at the crotch. And then up here, it's just two streaks, and I think if they're a little bit more narrow, I'd like them a bit more. Even getting it around here on the clasp of the belt, which I guess is okay, although it would have been nice if they did something over here to create some more asymmetry. Over here, it's too symmetrical, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, it's not a huge deal for me. Down here on the legs, you get more of the black shadowing, of course, on the inside of the left leg and on the outside of the right leg. Going on down, some more of the black detailing on the blue, and then also down here on the boots. And the boots, I feel like, are the most disappointing part of this figure to look at. Granted, I'm not Tarantino, I'm not looking at the feet of my action figures as often as I am the rest of the figure, but over here, you notice there is a lot of really nice sculpted detail in here to imply almost a rubbery, spandexy nature, but as for the black cell shading, it almost gets lost. Like, you're doing a really good job, you get it on the face, get it on the torso, arms, pelvis, legs, and then all of a sudden we just come to a stop right here, where the boot begins, and there's nothing here, and down here, it's like, dry wasteland, and then just a little bit on the toe. So, it's just, it feels inconsistent, not in a good way. Like, up here it's cool, because you got that asymmetry, but down here it just feels more lazy. Like, if they could have gone out of their way to get a little marker or pen or paintbrush, whatever, and do those tiny accents on at least one of the boots, or at least vary between them, I think that would have really made this figure more consistent. So, yeah, I mean, that's the story with this figure, and that's pretty much the review for the base figure himself. Inconsistent for sure, but overall, he still is an interesting figure as a concept. Now let's move on to accessories, which are actually pretty well done. So firstly, we have the DC Multiverse figure stand. And then next up, we have a blacked out trading card, because of course this is Page Punchers. So you got Superman here. It looks like we got Brainiac silhouetted in the background, which is very cool. And off to the back, here is the bio, if you want to do some reading. It looks like it's a basic story of Superman, so if you ever heard the name Clark Kent or Superman, nothing here should be news. But yeah, DC Direct once again. I don't know why they were really forcing that as opposed to DC Multiverse, but whatever. You also have a whole ton of hands here, which I have not really prepared because there's multiple pairs of hands. But first we have some open hands over here. Looks like they might be good for gripping perhaps, or maybe more relaxed, so that's nice to have. Oh, and on the main figure, you have a much more open hand over here. Let's see how that varies, actually. They're pretty close. I guess the one he's got on by default is a tad wider, so I don't know, more options, so that's cool. Or you can use spare hands for fodder for other figures if you want. And you have an open outstretched, perhaps flying or gliding head over here, maybe more relaxed. Then you also have, all these hands come with all three figures of Chris Reeve, by the way. But this next hand we have holds the key that creates his Fortress of Solitude, which is really cool. Very nice detail. They didn't have to include that. I believe on the other two releases, this crystal would have been transparent, but in here it is totally opaque. It's painted in green, which again is fitting for the cartoon aesthetic of this figure. We also have two fists, because Superman, of course, gotta have some fists. And we also have the classic outstretched flying hands from when he's soaring through the sky with Lois Lane. And lastly, we got a nice defiant pointing finger or nose-picking finger, whatever it is that you want it to be. So, yeah, really good selection of hands. We'll skip hand swaps today if it's all the same to you, because, I mean, they all fit fine. They're all made for the same figure, so there's no surprises. They all fit okay, so no issue there. But anyways, let's hop right into articulation. How much tilt do we have? Pretty good amount. Not much down, not as much back, actually none back at all, which is kind of unfortunate. But let's hop ahead and combine the torso with the waist and see if we can bend him upward. Yeah, if you want him flying straight forward, he's going to look a little weird, so be aware of that. Although I can't necessarily say that for the other two figures, because once again, we got different sculpt here in the neck, as well as the torso, so it might vary for those other two figures, not sure yet. As for the arms, they are on butterfly joints, so you got all the way around, out to the side. Got a bicep swivel as well, double jointed elbows, which should go all the way in, and they do. What was I saying there? I don't know, just ignore that. McFarlane typical wrists, they do exactly what you want them to do. Swivel in the torso, and we already had a look at down, which is not much. Better amount back, and very good tilt, actually. As to the waist, minor swivel. You're going to get more swivel in the main torso itself. As for legs, full splits, excellent. Kick forward to about 90. Back, a little bit more given the rubbery nature of the diaper in there. As for knees, double jointed, all the way in. Pull that back out. Actually, one thing I did want to note, this is something that we haven't really seen since the Marvel Legends Peter B. Parker, if you remember that from way back when. But when you push this leg a little bit too much straight and then reverse it in, if you get what I mean, if I bent it this way, then you will notice there's some stress in the plastic right there. So because this is just a little too streamlined, I should have had a tad more bulk in the top of the knee so that wouldn't happen. But yeah, just be aware of that. It's not the worst thing. Just don't articulate it too far. You should be okay. Down to the ankles, swivel, back, forward, toe, which I haven't broken out yet. Seems a little stiff, but whew, I don't use toe articulation much, but it's there. There you go. Really loud click. And, of course, you got your rocker. So, standard McFarlane fare articulation-wise, no huge surprises. Really, the only disappointment is that he can't be flying straight forward, so that kind of sucks. But then again, if he was in that pose, you wouldn't be seeing all the cell shading. So, I don't know. It's kind of pick your poison with this figure, but overall, I like it. What do you think? Before we do size comparisons, I totally forgot to mention the all-important comic over here. Got Superman 78, issue 1 of 6, so we can expect more. Got some other characters at the bottom there. Off the back, DC on the inside. It's exactly what you expect. It's a nice, looking comic. Here is one page for your pleasure. Looking very good. Ooh, we got a Brainiac drone over there, so that's pretty cool. Interesting. And on the back, you just got a ton of ads because it's McFarlane after all. Todd! And now here we are at size comparisons, which with a good variety of Superman, more in tune with the Donnerverse, and a little bit of Snyder thrown in there as well. So over here we have the NECA, I believe, Toys R Us exclusive Superman, of course the Christopher Reeve one, and he's notoriously short. He does not match with the McFarlane figures that we're getting today, so he's too short, and on top of that, the head sculpt wasn't very good, so I got him a third-party one from overseas. So bet your bottom dollar I'll be taking this head and popping it right onto the standard version that we'll be getting soon. So we'll have a look at that in the future. Over here, I have a custom that's been on the backlog for a very long time. I just wrapped him up today. I have my Clark Kent, which is actually done on the Schumacher Two-Face base body with the custom head sculpt I found online with the Zack Snyder Superman hands. So it's a very good hodgepodge, but if you have those parts lying around, it does a job. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily Chris Reeve, but it serves its purpose just as a generic Clark Kent. Does a job. I like it. And then over here, we actually have the Henry Cavill Justice League Superman with a custom head sculpt and a custom-made cape. And actually, he is a pretty good height compared to Christopher Reeve Superman over here, so that looks very good. And then lastly, of course, we have the Star Wars The Black Series Quash and Mechamuck. It's a pleasure to be part of this collection, and as a token of my goodwill, I present this gift to you, my armored friend. Finally, a kyber crystal with which I can create a lightsaber and defeat my enemies.
And bruh, it's just a house key, don't get too excited.
I'm going to keep my final thoughts on this figure short and sweet because I feel like we've pretty much covered all the ground that we needed to for the most part. This figure is pretty base, pretty standard. No real surprises in there. Although I think if there is any disappointment to be noted and any confusion to be noted, it's the fact that, again, we got the standard version of Christopher Reeve along with the Platinum version, and then we get this Page Punchers edition with different parts, rather than just a straight-up repaint. So I don't know what the answer to the question is when it comes to why does he vary so much when they could have just used the exact same parts and painted him differently. So I find that a little odd. Give me your thoughts in the comments, but overall, he's still cool. I mean, I like the cell shading, not for everybody, but if you're able to get a hold of him, he might, unfortunately, be the only one that you're able to get a hold of at this point, because the original Christopher Reeve Superman sold out so quick, and forget about getting the Platinum Edition. It's just absolute scalper crazy on eBay. Believe me, I looked. It's a nightmare. Don't subject yourself to that. But that being said, he's a fun figure. He has got his extra accessories. He's got the key to the Fortress of Solitude and all of that. So it's good. It's fine. And I totally neglected to mention the cape. The cape is beautiful. It's got the S logo on there. So all's well, not a whole lot of complaints here. There were some choices were made, but none of them hurt my overall experience with this figure. So it's good. I recommend him. He's fine. So let me know what you think about this figure in the comments. And as a last and final note, thank you very much for 600 subscribers. And if you're not subscribed to me, then it's not too late to join on the party. You know, you got the subscriber button right down there. So speaking of that, if you enjoyed, then please, as per usual, be sure to
Like, comment,
ring the bell to be notified of our latest arrivals. And subscribe.
Yeah, hi, Mechamuck here. If you want to see more from Pod Guy, then please be sure to check out the Pod Plays channel down in the description for some Let's Plays. And if you want to support the channel a bit too, you also got the Pod Patreon, which is down in the description as well. See you around, folks!
Thank you guys very much for watching. Rock on, and I will see you all later.